Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tales from a Professional Nerd. I am Bryan CP Steele, and I will be your nerd today. And every other day that you watch my silly little YouTube show, or catch me on Twitter or TikTok or Facebook, or any other weird media things that we do to try and make ourselves electronically famous and maybe listen to once in a while and spread some love and some positivity and all the other stuff that happens because of you guys, the viewers. So I'm in a crazy good mood, and it's not just because I've drank like a gallon of coffee, although I have. It has been a great week. Not a lot of sleep, you know, as is wont for Bryan, but I have ironed out what I believe to be some of the final initial rules and stat blocks for the new version of the Warzone miniatures game. I've sent those off to my cohort in crime, Alex at Resnova Games, for him to start looking through things, and we're going to start really pressing into the playtest. And we had a meeting earlier this week that was shockingly useful. It was phenomenal. We basically just started bouncing ideas off each other. We came up with it's a rule that's not going to come out for a while because it's about future products that aren't part of the initial launch, but it's an amazing rule, and I've not seen anything like it in miniature wargaming, which is to say a lot. And when we get around to it, I think that players are going to freak out at how cool it is. Which I know that's kind of a rough tease to basically be like, so here's this really cool rule that I can't wait to show you that it's probably going to take a year or two to get to because of having to get the game off the ground and profitable and all that stuff. But rest assured, I'm so jazzed for Warzone to come out. I know it's still technically in its infancy, and I know that it's still formative, and we still have a lot of stuff that we're working on, and playtesters might get their hands on it and say, this needs to be changed. Why they talk kind of like Cobra Commander, I don't know, but that's what you get with playtesters. But yeah, it's just, I'm excited. I'm super jazzed. And what helped with that, not only having a really good meeting with Alex, I love having good coworkers and colleagues, and in this case, employers. I love getting a chance to work with people that work with you, not against you, and they don't, hold that bowl over your head that says, this is, I'm going to dump this if you don't do what I say. I love having good people that I work with, and I right now, I am. I don't use this term very often because I'm not a religious person, but I'm truly blessed with the number of the companies that I work for right now and the people that I'm working with. And then I'm going to, in a second, when I start getting into the topic for today, I actually have another bit of awesome news that it goes hand in hand with that. But yeah, so Warzone, super excited about where that's headed. And what also helped, not only having that good meeting with Alex, but earlier this week, if you follow me on Facebook or Twitter, I think I tweeted it, I was interviewed by the Spanish YouTube channel Warzone Chronicles, asking a little bit about me and my background, basically letting the Warzone community know that I'm not just some guy off the street, that I'm not just, they picked a random guy out of the hat and said, hey, this guy's going to bring back Warzone. That I actually do have enough background in the industry and the stuff that I've messed with, and the fact that I have worked with major contracts and IP properties before, and yes, I realize how redundant that is. IP properties, intellectual properties. but it was a fun interview, and they asked me a couple of silly questions, and they asked me some stuff about my background, and it got me very nostalgic about some of my older, comrades in arms and people that I worked with. And I sent a couple of emails out and a couple of, hey, I hope everything's going okay with you and yours. But it just reinforced the fact that I really hope that the Warzone community collectively not only gives the new game a chance, but really sinks their teeth into it and finds that tactical nature, finds what Alex and I are trying to with this new rule set, and really, not even, obviously I want it to excel monetarily, but I want Res Nova to do really well, and I want them to have a reason to keep pressing out new models and keep pushing new rules and get us to the point where we're starting to crank out bigger and better and cooler stuff. Because as long as it keeps being successful, I can't imagine Alex would cut me loose if we're making a successful project. And I've got so many cool ideas for what I want to do in the future. This is the nature of this is the drawback of being who I am and what I do, is if money were no object and Res Nova was like, go ahead and just make a bunch of stuff, I would spend a month just doing nothing but making stat blocks and stat out everything that's ever had a model and be like, all right, cool, now it's just, let's make some models. And that's obviously not practical. We're not Games Workshop. We're Res Nova is a very small company, and unlike a lot of companies, the hope is to raise enough capital to not only make the game the way we want it, but have enough room to continue it and extend it and move it on, so that way it becomes its own engine and makes its own profit and so forth and so on. But like I said, I have a really, really good feeling about this game. I think the engine is tight. I think that with a little bit of spit and polish, we're going to make something really, really cool. And I'm hoping that the players out there, don't just see it as an opportunity to get new models, that they actually take a look at the game and they really look at the complexity that we're putting into it at a baseline level, knowing where we want to take it in the future. So that's just part of this week. I ran a Shadowrun game that was excellent. We had a blast. I got to play with some monster types that normal gaming folk don't have, because they don't work occasionally for Catalyst. So I was able to throw a couple of cool sixth world monsters at them that they were like, wait, what? And bam, out comes Poison Spitting Snake Lady. The Big Child's Kickstarter for the Camelot series. Not only are these models just gorgeous, but they announced just yesterday, or I guess by the time this comes out, it'll be a couple of days, that they're doing them for the first time in the 35mm scale as well. And that's huge. I know not everybody who watches this are miniature gamers or miniature painters, but from a miniature gaming standpoint, or from a miniature hobby standpoint, there are different scales of models. There's the tiny little itty bitty like Napoleonic like 6mm. There's some that have been scaled up to like a 15mm, where it's like definitely still a small scale game, but you start getting some detail and things. And then the primary area for most miniature games right now, most popular miniature games, I should say, or I'll hear it in the comments, is the 28 to 32mm super scale, which basically means roughly a model that is between 28 and 32mm tall is the average height of a person in that world, in that genre, that game, that whatever. And then beyond there are larger, things like I think Marvel Crisis Protocol, I think, are 40 mil, 35 to 40 mil scale. So they're definitely larger than the average bear, so to speak. And then there are, from there on out, there are very few games that use any of those larger scales, just because it's hard to get terrain, unless you're making it very specifically for that line. Props and things like counters, or if you want to like buy model cars or whatever to go along with things, the scale is going to be off. A lot of mass-produced terrain that you might buy from a company is built for that 28 to 32 millimeter thing, so your dudes are suddenly bigger than front doors on buildings. Just generally larger scale models aren't used for gaming. They're used as art pieces. They're used to make awesome dioramas or enter into contests, and excel. Some of the best paint jobs, breathtaking artistry that I've seen are on much larger models. And Big Child has, for pretty much ever, with only a few exceptions, have made almost universally these larger art style miniatures. And of course, they're beautiful, but they can't really be used for a miniatures game unless somebody was designing them specifically around like 75 millimeter figures or something. I digress. But this Kickstarter, in those last couple of days, Big Child announced that should they hit a couple of stretch goals, they were going to do a series of these Camelot figures in 35 millimeter scale. Now, that is still a little bit larger, just slightly larger than what most games are using, but it is close enough that for a lot of games, especially since these are going to be like character level, epic, these are my centerpiece style models, that this will be a perfect centerpiece general, or or a stand-in for a superhero that you might want. They're beautiful, they're gorgeous, and they hit all those stretch goals. They blasted through them like nobody's business. And so I'm super excited because it shows, not only does it show Big Child's artistry to a larger market who aren't into buying those larger busts, but it's also it shows them as a company that there is definitely a want for their kind of skill and their kind of artistry on a smaller scale. And if I can convince them to do more of their amazing models on smaller scales, that is one step closer to us being able to make a game, make a miniatures game, or make a miniatures game expansion or something like that that uses that Big Child IP, that Big Child product, which in that case, like, everybody wins. So super psyched about that as well. Again, it's been a hell of a good week. My guys out at Crafty Games, another company that I work for, they launched their Kickstarter for Dollars to Donuts, a fun little board game about, you guessed it, donuts. While I had nothing to do with the Kickstarter or with the game itself, that they partnered up with someone else on that one, it looks super fun, and it, as far as I can tell, it's doing pretty well as far as Kickstarter goes. So thumbs up for that. Got to be happy for my crafty fellas. On that same train of thought, I've been working hard on the new version of Spycraft, getting some words down on the page for that, which is turning out really good. I mean, not like patting myself on the back, my stuff's turning out good, but the actual rule set and things that are being made, I'm pretty happy with what is being created. When we are closer to talking more about that product directly, I'll actually probably devote an entire episode specifically to the new Spycraft. But as it is right now, if you were a fan of the old game, you will enjoy the new game. You'll see a lot of homage to the old versions, but in a new and I almost just cursed how excited I was. A new and really cool way of bringing that sort of Mission Impossible espionage to the table again, in new and spectacular ways. So again, super psyched about where that's headed. Still putting down words on the Shadowrun novel. I wrote a scene just yesterday that I had to reread it like 2 or 3 times after I wrote it to make sure that it sounded right. But I don't think I've ever seen a sci-fi fiction story describe food trucks in this way before, and so I did. So, food trucks. And I'm also coming up on a part of the book where I get to fulfill a promise to a friend of mine, where I told her that I was going to take one of her personas, one of her character ideas, and get it in a book. And so I'm right to almost to that point where I get to put this character into the book. It's not a major role. It's not like, oh, hey, suddenly this, Bryan's creating a new A-lister. No, it's an absolute cameo walk-on. But for people like us, it's just cool to see our ideas on the page. And I told Hannah that I would do that for her, is take her idea and put it on the page and find a way to make it work. And I'm coming up to that scene, so I'm excited about that. And then hopefully when the book comes out, she will be excited to see her character concept in ink on the page and in action and such. And no, I'm not going to be a jerk and kill her off. That would be just a jerk move. Be like, haha, I made your character. Yep. So what else? Let's see. Tomorrow I have the last of our little mini campaign with Peter Adkinson in the world of Chaldea. Our little role playing with the Burning Wheel rule set. While I am going to be extremely sad to see the game end, every game has to come to an end, and this whole thing was an idea of just a short little couple of chapters of a neat story to bide some of the quarantine time. And in the process, we've helped Peter shape a part of his world. Where our game is set, he had not really completely shaped it all out, so we helped him a great deal with that. And so it's kind of cool to know that maybe in a similar fashion to like what I'm doing with the Shadowrun, it's kind of cool that maybe our characters might end up in stories or in background or books or whatever for Chaldea. So I hope so. Maybe. I don't know. Who knows? Either way, tomorrow will be a bittersweet day because it's the last session in that campaign. But it also means that my every other Friday will be freed up for more work, and I am starting to get swamped with stuff that needs to get done here at the end of the summer. So bittersweet, but useful. Let's see what else. I want to take a look at all right, let's try that again. My lovely bride, her art company, Artemis Portraits. She not only has released a whole bunch of like t-shirts and things onto her website, but for the people who are thankfully, hopefully all of you, when you guys go out, you've been using masks. She actually has some of her own graphics on masks, so that way you can look cool and special when you're out there, tooling around. I wear her blue samurai mask all the time when I go out, and I've gotten several people where they laugh. They smile and they laugh, and they're like, yep, you're really leaning into it. And the way I look at it is, if you've got to wear it with a smile, man. Don't be all like, God, I hate wearing this mask when I go out in public. Be like, this is an opportunity for me to put on my Venom teeth. Enjoy the fact that you get to be a grocery store ninja. Whatever. This is you're doing the right thing anyway when you wear your mask and you go out, because you're trying to help stop this virus from being a permanent frickin' fixture. But also, it's just a minor thing that you've got to do to get by for a little while, and then get back home. Just let's do it for everyone else. Let's do it for the public, not ourselves. Let's not think about ourselves, or in this case, let's think about ourselves in getting a cool mask, but let's think about everybody else by wearing it. So, earlier this week, my lovely bride not only put up a bunch of mask images and stuff, but she finished her a picture, a one-of-a-kind piece of charcoal art. I guess it's also charcoal graphite stuff, of Satine Phoenix as a tiefling sorcerer. Very cool piece of art. She put up on her website. She put up a short video of her fixing it and finishing it, and with some of the kind of heavy stuff that's been happening, especially in Satine's life right now, which I don't know if you'll see this or not, sweetie, but my heart goes out to you. I know it's been rough, and I've already sent you messages about on a personal level, but I'm so sorry that you have to deal with everything that you're dealing with right now. But that being said, the art looks great. And a little bit later on, after Natalie gets all of the signatures of the people who because this is a part of a series of several Hollywood and media stars that she's doing pieces for, they're all going to sign them. And eventually there's going to be an auction for these one-of-a-kind signature pieces. And then all of the auction is going to go to charity. I don't know what charity is going to right now, but either way, she got to show off one of the finished pieces, and the responses have been muy bueno, been great. So I'm very proud of her, and it is a step in the right direction. Now, on a personal level, I also know that there is a piece that she is working on that, when it is done, it's going to hang right here under Kylo, so you guys will be able to see it all the time. But we're going to auction off the actual original for GaryCon, to raise money to help keep GaryCon going, and to help Luke and Alex and those guys, because conventions are hard right now. But eventually there will be a piece hanging right there that you guys are going to go, ooh, ah, and you're going to wonder where to get it from. And it's from artemisportrait.com. It's in my description. Now let's get to I've been talking about my week for 20 minutes. This is a long 20 minutes, but I'm excited about all the cool stuff that's happening. Now let's talk about the topic of the day. First, I'm going to show you, it's been a little while, but my buddies, my sponsor at Armor Class 10 Apparel, have sent me some shirts. Today I'm sporting my Lord of the Crit Rolls. Obviously, a take on the Lord of the Rings IP sort of thing. It is not about Critical Role. I know I said that with some punctuation there, but I say that because it is no secret I am not a massive fan of Critical Role. I think it's just fine what they're doing, and I like what it has done for some of the industry. I guess that's a topic for another day, perhaps. But I just wanted to express that this is a Lord of the Rings shirt, Lord of the Critical Roles, critical hits and such. The reason why I'm wearing this shirt today is because today's episode, now that I'm finally getting around to talking about it, is today's episode is about kind of whether the difference between using published work, like written material, source books, that sort of thing, and a homebrew campaign. Or a homebrew idea. Not even necessarily a campaign, like just homebrew stuff. Your own monsters. Which, again, ties in. The Book of Monstrous Might, which is, I'm doing a bunch of monsters for that on Kickstarter, is doing great. And that's the kind of thing that this episode is about, is that whole book is basically homebrew information. It's new monsters PCs, new ways to add things to your PCs with a monster flair, tactics and things like that. It's all these things that, it's not an official source. It's still made by a collaboration of us through Total Party Kill Games. But the end result is effectively, I mean, it is a established product, and if you brought it to your DM, or if your DM already owns it, that you could say, hey, is it cool if we use this stuff? And they're going to look through it and, hopefully, say, yeah, this stuff looks great. Or as a DM, it gives you a whole pile of new things to surprise your players with. But what it does is that it adds effectively a homebrew element to what you're already running. And on a live chat that I did earlier this week, I joined someone else's live chat. I was not live, so don't think you missed anything. I mentioned that they were talking about what was the next that one of their campaigns was getting ready to end, and they were getting ready to start a new one. And someone asked them, "Are you going to do another book adventure?" Because what they had just finished was The Curse of Strahd, and they were like, are you going to do another pre-published adventure arc, or are you going to homebrew? And this person, the person on the live stream, really felt very like flustered and seemed extremely like, oh no, I'm not ready to run a homebrew. And that's what inspired me to that and how well Monstrous Might is doing. Another project that I'm working on myself, which when it's a little closer to, you know what, I'm gonna tell you about it. I don't even care. That's the Tales of a Professional Nerd way. I can do that if I want to. So I have officially, as soon as she signs the contract and sends it back to me, I have signed an artist to do a bunch of concept art for a PDF that I'm going to put on the DM's Guild for official purchase and official use for my lovely folks. And when it is done, I will do a review of it here, so you guys can possibly go pick it up and be like, "Woo, wow, this is cool." Basically, what I've done is I took one of every one of the classes, the 12 main classes in the player's handbook, plus the artificer that shows up in the Eberron book, and I made an alternate class path. If you are not familiar with D&D 5 Ed, or 5th edition, if you are not into the whole brevity thing, every class, basically you earn a level or two, or in some cases, right at the very beginning, but whatever the case may be, is that you are not just a fighter. You are not just a rogue. You sort of specialize yourself by taking one of these class paths. And in the original Player's Handbook, pretty much all of them have one or two, or have 2 or 3 options. Some of them have more in the case of like clerics and stuff. But for the most part, it's just a handful of different directions. And now that 5th Ed has been out for quite a while, I have noticed that there are a lot of people that are like, we want more class paths. And you go to someplace like D&D Beyond, you go to one of their, you go to their list of things, and there is a ton of people who have ideas. There's a bunch of like play testables, things that is like, hey, this one's not official content, but it's in an Unearthly Arcana expansion. Use it if you want to. There's obviously room for more cool stuff, more homebrew stuff. Now, mind you, it stops being homebrew when it becomes published and becomes something that your group or your DM or your game master or whatever adopts into their game. It starts being official. But up until then, it's still technically homebrew. Whether or not you're a paid professional, whether you're just a social media person that's like, I came up with this thing, it doesn't matter about that. What matters is whether or not it's fair, it's fun, and your group likes it. And that's what this stuff's all about. So I am creating it's already half written now. I just basically needed to find an artist and then do some layouts and make it all pretty and fancy, and hopefully get my wife to pretty and fancify it, because she's good at that kind of thing. And then get it up on DM's Guild, and then I will start telling you guys all about it. I'll do a full review of my own product, try not to be biased, I suppose, and tell you all about it. But basically, what I did is I took all of the classes plus their artificer, and I created another path, another class path for each one. Some of them are pretty straightforward. It's the okay, this is kind of like this, but it's for instance, the druid subpath that I created, the circle below, is druid paths are like the circle of beasts, the circle of the moon. It's different aspects of nature. The circle below is basically a druid that has dedicated his life to subterranean, like vermin and tunneling creatures and all things slimy and dark. Doesn't mean evil. It's just someone who is akin to making their natural attunement is to that of the things that crawl on their bellies through the dirt and the mud and the darkness. And I think that's going to be a very cool. I think someone's going to probably grab a hold of that and go, "Oh, this could be pretty neat." For instance, I showed one of the classes as it stands, specifically to someone who plays D&D, and they said, "This is fantastic, and I can't wait." It's the Barbarian Path of the Woadsman. Basically, it is someone that uses woad, which is a semi-hallucinogenic mystic grease paint to control and direct and extend their battle rages, allowing them to basically do things with their rages that normal barbarians can't do, but they have to basically prep this material component effectively ahead of time and then get themselves all dolled up before they do it. There's more to it, and like I said, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it because I don't want to. I want to review it at a later, in a future time when I've got some art to show you guys and stuff too. But basically, that is what I want to do. I want to do more of this kind of my own creations to give up to the people and get people to use it and buy it and maybe make a little extra money on the side. But either way, it's a way for me to get my ideas out on a paper and out for people to use without trying to run 20 D&D games so I can use all these things. Today's topic, this whole homebrew versus published, there's a very fine line. And I think this goes out to the DMs out there who are afraid to use their own homebrew campaigns, that are afraid they're afraid to make up their own cities. And what if I have a hole in my story, or what if there's plot holes, or what if my players ask me something that I'm not ready to answer? I think that it falls into two categories. Is you can spend months building every single nook and cranny of your homebrew world. You can make it as completely complex as possible, and I guarantee at some point a player is going to ask you something that you're going to go, "Oh, I didn't think of that." And you're going to need to come up with that either on the spot or be honest with them and say, "Hey, I have not done that research yet into my own world. Give me a minute. I'll tell you what's up." Or if it's not time pressing, between sessions I'll let you know what's going on. But the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create your own story, and the players are hopefully helping you with that, not fighting you against it. Not just like blocking you at every turn to try and explain things to you or explain things to them. But you are, basically the difference between a published campaign setting or a published adventure arc, or even published adventures, like actual, like by the book, room to room dungeon crawls. It just comes down to your level of comfort. I know people who have taken published adventures and have run them in a way that it felt like a homebrew, that it felt like everything was off the cuff. Nothing felt like it was, or at least written written with the campaign in mind, not taken from a book that was mass produced or something along those lines. You know, one of my dungeon masters that has run for me for years, he has his own world that we've played in many times, and we still have questions about it. But when playing, it feels almost like he is taking all this information basically out of a published source. And the reason for that is because as a DM, as a creative, as a writer, he has effectively written all of this stuff out. He kind of, you know, despite it being a homebrew world and a homebrew setting, it is still it is still a written setting. So there, you know, a pre-published work. It's just not published openly. It's just he wrote it all down into his files, into his notebooks, into his 3-ring binders and things. Just because it's not published to the world doesn't mean that it doesn't have that published, polished feel. And so we know we're in a homebrew world. We know that all of this stuff came out of his brain and came out of, you know, echoes of past campaigns, you know, things like that. But when we walk away from the table, we're not basically being like, oh, he had to think of all of that on the fly, you know. And even then, there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you are in a homebrew world or a pre-published product and your players have stumped you. Make it up. You're the DM, and barring, you know, as long as you think it through a little bit, you know, for instance, you do Curse of Strahd, and unless you want your game to turn topsy-turvy and then you really kind of fall off the published tracks, you're going to stay in Ravenloft. You're not going to have Strahd suddenly be able to leave the Demiplane of Dread. You know, Strahd as a character is the heart of Ravenloft. He's the heart of Barovia. Even if the player characters manage to kill him as per the rules, you're probably not going to have him actually die. You know, you'll have him, you know, disappear at the last minute or reform the following day, cursing their names, but, you know, being like, you know, good on you, you managed to defeat me. Honor is where it goes. But even those decisions that you're making, even those are kind of homebrewing a little bit. You're basically changing how the rules work to better fit the story. And that's really all a homebrew is you figuring out how to make the story that you want to tell. There is a lot of talk right now about how there are some depictions of some of the races in Dungeons & Dragons that could be considered pretty off color and almost downright racist. And there are a lot of players that are just furious that they're, you know, what do you mean evil orcs are racist? That's not what they're saying. They're not saying that evil orcs are racist. They're saying the description that this species is being colored with and the words being used to describe them have potentially negative overtones to people of color who have seen themselves described in such a manner by racist assholes. Pardon my language. And so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to you as a player or a DM whether or not that language is viewed by someone as racist or whatnot, because it's your game. It's your game. You could, if you want all of your orcs to be evil, and, you know, to embody all of the evil things, that's fine. What people are trying to do is they just basically don't want you to advertise that all orcs everywhere are evil no matter what, because again, that is a published product. In your homebrew campaign, which could be based off of the published product, if you want all of your orcs to be evil, then all your orcs can be evil. No one's going to stomp down your door and be like, gotta have that one good orc or that one Driz Jordan drow. You don't have to. It's your game. It's your table. It's your campaign. It's your story. But as the publishers, as the people who are putting it out, they don't want to upset people by the language that they're using, by the terms that they're using. And there's nothing wrong with not wanting to upset people. I know I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but there's too many threads on things that I'm at that is just people are so self-centered and you can't do that. Don't change that because I liked it. Obviously, I'm a horrible racist. That's not what they're saying. They're not just because you liked evil orcs or just because in your world all drow are terrible slave masters. It doesn't make you a racist. It just means that they don't want to advertise that as how that race is always going to be forever. They don't want to use that kind of language. They don't want to possibly have people believe that that is where they're coming from. Just like you don't want people to believe that's where you're coming from. So do what you want to do in your homebrew games or in your homebrew version of an established game. Just don't yell at people and get mad at them for not wanting to upset someone. That's the stupidest thing to be. It is so mind-numbingly. It makes me so mad when someone is so they're furious about this thing because someone else wanted it this way. If you don't like it, say you don't like it and move on. Or if you don't like it, have a conversation about it. But basically to say, hey, there's an entire group of people out there that might not like how this was published initially back in the 70s or 70s and 80s, and then you get mad because they got mad? Suck it up. Change it for your game if you want. I'm sorry. I know I just totally tangented and I got away from homebrew and I got away from talking about the ways to make these things, but it's a nerve thing for me right now because I've seen too many of my professional colleagues and hell, a few icons that I really love their work, fight so hard against what is effectively just be nice to other people. Pay attention to their feelings. That's it. Don't be a dick. Sorry. All right. So back on topic. So basically, there is nothing wrong as a DM if you want to run a pre-published campaign. If you want to run word for word, reading it like a script out of the book, where it's highlighted, it says read this to your players. You read it to your players, like off of cue cards. There is nothing wrong with that because at the end of the day, you are still running a game, and as long as your players and you are enjoying it, who cares if it's pre-published? Who cares if it's on cue cards or if you have to stop and go, oh wait, sorry, I wasn't supposed to read that to you. Pre-read your stuff so you don't do that. But we're gaming. We are playing games. We are trying to entertain ourselves. We're trying to forget the stress of the world and maybe save the kingdom at the same time and not get eaten by a vampire lord. These are the things that we want. These are the things that we want to see. We want to have a good time. Whether or not you're reading off of a cue card in a book, or whether or not you are coming up with, entire bardic songs off the top of your head to cast your spells. And as long as people are having fun, and everybody at the table is having a good time, rock it. You're doing the right thing. You're running your game right. Now, advice-wise, because that's what this topic originally came to, is that someone had asked me my advice of how to move from all I've ever run are pre-published adventures to homebrewing my own game. I think if you are willing to just jump in and take the plunge, grab yourself a notebook, grab a condensed notebook, and start jotting down all the things that you would want to know as a player if you were entering someone else's game. You know, which religions are there? Is there something weird about any of the special races? You know, in your world, are there no elves? You know, or are only elves, like there's like 1/1,000,000th of the elves that there used to be? You know, I played in a game once where there were no orcs. They were just it was the orcs were stamped out universally, like genocide style, by some overzealous heroes who made the right kinds of wishes at the end of their campaign, and it had a huge impact on the world. Hobgoblins and goblins ran amok because there were no orcs to prey upon them. There were no orcs to smash them down and keep them in place. So like the actual goblinoid races, the bugbears, the hobgoblins, and the goblins, grew to be a titanic kingdom of their own because there were no orcs to help keep them in check effectively. And that's a cool facet. You know, that's a neat thing. And so what you do is that you basically ask yourself a bunch of questions about your game, about your world, that you would want to know if you were a player. And it doesn't mean, you know, every single tiny thing. Oh, hey, how many capital cities are there? Or, you know, is this, you know, if you want to start small, have your game start, you know, like if you really are just kind of one of those, all right, I want to start small and I'll work my way out. Maybe have your first homebrew game based off of a city. One city. Single city. Bloop. I mean, hell, that's how Greyhawk started. Greyhawk started with a single town. And then the books came out and they started expanding and adding the greater nations to that world. And then eventually there was wars, and you know, like there's let's see, what else? Planescape, as an old D&D world, was initially based around the city of Sigil. And you know, yeah, it was huge and had all kinds of different aspects to it, but they didn't add kind of what else was outside the City of Blades or the City of Doors until afterwards, because the focus of the story was going to be there. So in your homebrew game, you can do the same thing. Start small, whether it's a city or a kingdom or a continent, and then if one of your players asks, hey, is there anything outside of this continent, or is there anything outside of this city, you can write it down, be like, you know what? Your character, you know, very few people ever travel outside of the city walls, or, you know, the ocean is extremely dangerous, it's filled with sea monsters, so no one really, you know, very few people ever sail away from the coasts of this continent. And then you make a little note of it. And then in your downtime, you can start dreaming up these ideas of where you want to take your world beyond, you know, based off of that player's question. And these are the things that you can do to set up your initial parameters. You basically your baseline stuff. Once you have the kind of the basics of what you want to do, then you can start sprouting off of these basics. You know, okay, you've made your kingdom. So is it a kingdom? Is it an empire? Is it an oligarchy? You know, like, is it ruled by a council of elders? If not, if it's a kingdom, do people like the king? Is he an awesome ruler that, like, you know, fought his way to the top as a war hero, or was he just born into it? Or is he a she? Maybe it's a queen. Have there been wars? Is there like, there's all these different things that you can do by answering these questions, and then rather than trying to, you know, from building block on up, just answer these questions and keep coming up with more questions and use these answers to fill in the blanks until eventually you've got enough data there that you can really sort of smoosh it together into a cohesive story. And that's kind of the basis of your homebrew. Combine that with, when you are stumped, either during a game or between sessions or anything, or any time that you have a chance to make something up for your game, or even just define that it is the same as it is in, you could basically say this is my homebrew campaign, but it's taking place in Faerun, so it's a Forgotten Realms game. Your players now know that they can refer to Forgotten Realms stuff, but the actual like story and stuff is coming off of your page, and so instead of out of a published book, it's coming out of your book, your notebook, and that's in a nutshell. That's kind of how a homebrew comes around. With very few exceptions, I would say a homebrew campaign is 8/10 prep and 2/10 improv. Sometimes more if you're more comfortable with working on the fly. But I know a lot of dungeon masters sometimes, especially those that have come from a background of doing everything by the book, that they may not be too terribly comfortable just making stuff up. Although what I will say is that if you do have a homebrew and you have your homebrew guide there, you always and forever write everything down if it's important. If it is a named character, a mayor of a town, a name of a city, a description of a mountain range, hey, you've named this river, write it down. Even if it is just like shorthand, you jot down, the Silvercrest River comes out of the mountains, lots of fish. That could be your note, because it is a homebrew campaign is more believable when all those little facts come together during a game. Whether or not it comes together at the same session, or 2 sessions later, they meet a guy and say, oh yeah, my family are fishermen on the Silvercrest. Oh, cool, we've been there. They have something to connect to. They know about this river, so suddenly they know this guy is probably a profitable farmer or a fisherman, because you've explained that this river is known for its abundance of fish. He's if he mentions that he lives closer to the mountains, then where on the river he is. There's all these different things that you can do, but as long as you can tie it back to facts, or prepare yourself to tie back to what you're saying as a fact in your homebrew, your players will absolutely appreciate the fact that your game setting, that your game chronicle is coming together so well, that it's moving so smoothly. And again, a good player base and a good table, a good game group, if you look at them and say, all right, you have now asked me a question that I don't have the answer to, unless you feel comfortable coming up with it on the fly, be honest with them. Be like, listen, this part of, I'm still, this is still a work in progress. I was not prepared for that question. Good on you. I'll get back to you when I can. Or, hey, let's take a quick 10-minute break. Everyone get up, go to the bathroom, have a snack, whatever, while I jot down the answer to your question. And then we'll get back to the game, and then now you will have had a few moments to think about it, patch it into your existing world. You're not just basically giving them a knee-jerk reaction. And again, and that will come together, and it'll feel all right. One of the other things that you can do, and this is something that I think a lot of DMs do, is if they're running a game in an existing world, like if they're, like for instance, the Arcane Promise, the Spelljammer game that I run, is based in Spelljammer, which, yeah, there hasn't been a publication for it for a long time, but I'm going to do my damnedest to stick to all of the stuff that has been written in the past and try and homebrew my way into a few things that they don't know, bring around some, patch in the things that have happened in the last 15 years of D&D, and that way it will, it'll feel homebrew for the plot and the story and the characters and the arc, but it'll feel like it is part of that living Spelljamming world, because that's what I want for hopefully in the future to eventually be able to publish this stuff. But again, I digress. That's the freelancer in me talking. But if you want to run, like the person who had told me about their Curse of Strahd issue, they now have a decent idea of how Ravenloft works. They know about Barovia, they know about Strahd and the mists and the masters of the Demiplane of Dread. They know how that stuff works because that published work that they ran gave them that information. What they may want to do as their first homebrew is go ahead and stay in Ravenloft, run a homebrew Ravenloft game that uses the information that they've already got and lets them build on it. And then they can build from there. Or if they're like, you know what, I am ready, they can start from scratch and just start homebrewing their way through it. It depends on how comfortable they are with making stuff up, how prepared they are. I know there's almost every DM out there that I've ever talked to, almost everybody has got their own world that they kind of have in the back of their head. I know I'm doing a lot with Spelljammer right now because it's a kind of a professional thing, but if you look over here, I've got my professionally made maps from my homebrew setting that unfortunately didn't make it through Kickstarter, but maybe one day will if I get enough time and effort. Those are my 7th Crown maps. I will always have in the back of my head the concept of maybe eventually being able to go back to 7th Crown. Most DMs have got their homebrew thing lurking back there, lurking in the pages, waiting for them to eventually run a game based off of it. And the more work they put into it, the more seamless it will feel when they go ahead and run it, because effectively they're making their own published world. It's just instead of using someone else's writing, they're using their own. And I think that that there's a lot to be said for a very well prepared homebrew game feeling like it came out of a magazine or came out of a book or a publication. There are also dozens, if not hundreds, of home published worlds that aren't part of the main D&D storyline that you can get your hands on and run people through that. Yeah, it's a published work, but it's a published work from like a third-party resource or something like that. People might not recognize it, and you might be able to borrow ideas from it or set your own game, your own homebrew chronicle in someone else's published works, third-party or otherwise. Basically, there's just there's really no limit to what you want to do and what you want to go with. And I know that there's some people out there like, well, if you make your homebrew and you just steal a bunch of stuff from other people's worlds, that's not cool. I disagree. It's not stealing if you are just basically playing a game and having a good time. It's not like you're doing the whole, all right, well, I'm going to take these pages verbatim and I'm going to republish them in my own book and make money on it. That's plagiarism. But basically, using someone else's ideas to make your game cooler and your players have a better time and you have a better time running it, then do it. Use someone else's spells. Use someone else's ideas. Watch someone's Twitch stream and go, man, that is a damn fine plot hook. If it helps you and your gaming table have a better time, do what you need to do. Homebrew, pre-published, homage, whatever. Because at the end of the day, again, it is all about having a good time, telling a good story, and everybody involved walking away from the table happy that you've played and happy of the things, or bittersweet if their character died, or whatever. Whatever their goal is, we want it to be on a positive level for you to have accomplished what you wanted to accomplish by playing these games. Because it shouldn't be a chore. It shouldn't be, stressful. You shouldn't have a crazy amount of anxiety about running a game. Because if that's the case, if you're doing yourself emotional and mental harm because oh my god, I don't have all the answers. I don't know. It's freaking me out. Then maybe you shouldn't run that game that night. Take a deep breath. take a night to yourself, or talk to your players and say, guys, I'm really freaking out about this next session. You know, I don't know if it's going to go well. Let them know where you're feeling, because again, hopefully these people are your friends, or at least good acquaintances, where you're or you know, decent people that you're playing with at your store or whatever, and that they'll understand as a DM that either you're not ready, whether it's the materials or just mentally and emotionally, or be honest with yourself. And if homebrewing a campaign makes you that anxious that you don't have all the answers, or you know, oh no, I can't improv, and you know, it's going to come to a screeching halt, then just don't. There's no one is going to judge you from finding a cool pre-published adventure or an adventure arc and run it. That's why people like me exist. We write those things. We create those class pads. We create those feats. We create those monsters and adventure arcs and dungeons in a box and all that stuff, because we know that there are people out there that would be much more comfortable running pre-published stuff that's been run through and tested and whatever by pros like us, that we want you to be happy. We want your game group to be happy. And that's it. So if you aren't ready to homebrew and you know it and you feel it in your bones, then just don't. Find something that someone else has made and run that. Because as long as your players and you are having a good time and walking away from the table happy that you've played, it's a success. Whether or not it's a TPK or they win and wish away all the orcs, it's a success. And that's really all we want for every game table, is to be a successful game, win or lose, if you get my drift. So I know I've been jawing on a long time, and I know that I spent a bunch of time talking about awesome stuff in the beginning, and I hope that my eagerness to please and the excitement I have for all of this cool gaming stuff blasts out through the internet waves to you, and that you can't help but smile and you can't help but have a great time, and you go out there, quarantine or not, use a digital asset, put on your mask, do what you gotta do, but have a good time and play some games, because that's what it's all about. See ya.